world is a big place, and there's a story to be found in every corner. But there are certain places, special places, that time and again capture our attention. Points on the map that have the power to crystallize the chaos of life into stories that stand the test of time. There's a place like that in America, in a town called Daytona Beach. For more than half a century, the Daytona International Speedway has been the setting for stories of bravery, determination, family. Many of them are close to our hearts. But some stories sit just beneath the surface of collective memory, just as potent as the familiar tales, just waiting to be told.
When did you start Smokey's Automotive?
1946.
You didn't grow up in Daytona, did you?
No.
Where you
Well,
from?
we got to go through that one again?
Yeah.
All right. When the war first started, they made me an engineering test pilot, which is a fancy sounding thing, but a very boring job. Since that became so boring, I started figuring out places I could go and get back in the 8 hours or so that I had, and Daytona was one place I picked. When I flew over this place, it was such a beautiful looking place. I thought, hell, that's where I'd like to live. So when I did decide to get out of the Air Force, I came right straight down here.
Smokey Unick was a mad scientist, pushing every limit. By the late 50s, he found a like mind in driver Paul Goldsmith. And together, they set out to make Daytona Beach their personal proving ground.
Horsepower. If you look at the beach course, it was 4.1 mile. Smokey, he had the advantage in that he could get that extra horsepower down that long straightaway. You know, there's just so much you can do to a car to get the horsepower out. Your driver's going to floor it. Where's that extra horsepower going to come from? It's going to come from right here.
Just look at that man drive. Goldsmith streaks for the checkered flag and wins.
Was that the highlight of your career up to then?
Probably.
He was very irreverent, very sarcastic, but maybe that was part of his charm. Unfortunately, Smokey Unick and Bill France Sr., the president of NASCAR, they were kind of like oil and water. They just didn't get along.
France just finished the old racetrack, and he's got a big deal set to put the first lap on it. I had a Pontiac station wagon. Pontiac loaned me. And I just drove out there and right past him and drove around the damn racetrack. And I was the first one that ever went around it. Oh, was he hot.
I bet he was. I mean, that had to be his pride and joy, that racetrack.
Well, he had all the TV there.
So he was trying to get some press, right?
Yeah, he got it.
Racing, as it was being born with NASCAR here in Daytona Beach, was lawless. It was the Wild West.
There's a lot of stories about Smokey. They drained the fuel cell at Daytona, and he drove his car on it back over the Halifax River over there at his shop. I don't know where the gas came from.
I could have drove the son of a bitch to Jacksonville with what I had in.
And everybody said, how can he do that? Well, back then, there was no rule on the gas line, how big it was and how long it was. So he had a 50-foot gas line underneath the seats. Smokey was never a cheater. There was no rule.
They knew when he showed up at the track that he was the nemesis. He not only went in the gray areas, but where it almost got black, he was over there.
If you're an innovator and you're a smart guy like Smokey was, and there is no rule, is there really a gray area? He made them right rules.
Everybody was wondering whenever Smokey would show up, what's he up to now?
And among the top contenders should be the Ford Fairlanes, the Plymouths, the Dodges, and a lonely Chevelle, which somehow managed to win the pole. That's car number 13, Curtis Turner.
When Smokey brought that Chevelle in, I don't think there's been a feat in stock car racing more formidable for the time and the place, because you had those petty Chrysler products. You had the Fords and Holman and Moody with cars by the dozen. It was just verboten. There wasn't any Chevrolets in the race.
And when Curtis turned that 180-mile-an-hour lap, nobody could believe a NASCAR race car could go that fast. I was there as a kid. I don't know what he had in that engine or what kind of exhaust system, but it sounded almost like a semi going down the road.
Now, of course, NASCAR was all over the car trying to figure out what are they doing. The rumor about, well, it really wasn't a 67 Chevelle. It was a 3/4 scale model of it. That was not true.
In them days, there was no rule about what you could do underneath the car. Nobody even looked. The bottom of it was like the bottom of a turtle, just slick as hell. In other words, there was a lot of aerodynamic work on that thing that you couldn't really see if you just looked at the car. If you looked under it, then you'd say, oh.
He had an uncanny ability to see things that needed to be done and then could figure out a common sense way to do it. Smokey was so smart, it was just hard to be around him and think, why didn't I think of that?
He came up with an idea of soft walls using old racing tires. He was really into safety. He used a very unusual roll cage design. He built it like an X. Very unusual, but it was very effective. When Curtis Turner flipped that Chevelle at Atlanta, a lot of folks who were there say it's the worst accident they ever saw.
No, I was there, and the car was just torn to smithers.
And Curtis never got a scratch out of that. So Smokey, he was a genius.
In his era, they lost a lot of drivers, and he thought about those things, and that's part of his genius. What they say, there's nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come, but guys like Smokey were way ahead of their time with a lot of their ideas.
In spite of what everybody thinks, I have met an awful lot of smart guys in Daytona. I have met no geniuses.
His legacy is a brain that we had never seen in NASCAR before and may never see again.
The Daytona 500 demands something of those who compete for its title. It requires grit and tenacity, the ability to overcome obstacles, and stand strong in the face of adversity. There was a time when it wasn't just stock car drivers who sought to prove themselves on the high banks.
An Indianapolis driver has taken over, number 11, Mario Andretti, here to challenge the great stock car drivers.
Mario Andretti was born in Italy, immigrated to America, and made a name for himself in open-wheel racing. But he was always searching for new challenges.
My focus was primarily the IndyCar series, but that wasn't enough. If I had an open weekend or whatever, I just wanted to drive something else.
We had a lot of crossover in those days. To go down to the Daytona 500 and see A.J. Foyt, Johnny Rutherford, and people like that racing in a race against our guys really did something for racing.
A.J. Foyt had been driving there, and he's competitive. He inspired me. He was a chief competitor where I was in Indy cars. And I said, if they can do it, you know, why can't I? I was very much involved in the Ford Le Mans program. They were obviously very prominent in NASCAR, and I would express a desire to be driving there.
So Ford said, well, you know, the kid's such a good driver. We'll just hook him up.
Andretti was placed with Holman Moody, an elite organization. His teammate NASCAR superstar Fred Lorenzen.
I was in good company with the golden boy of NASCAR at the time.
Freddie had already won the 565, and he was always one of the front runners and one of the favorites.
Fred was a good teammate, but we had no dialogue between us. I was a stranger.
Mario wasn't the Mario we know today. You know, this legend. The team certainly looked at him as a number 2 driver.
Car wasn't fast. I was not getting good engines. I knew the gear that I had and revs that I should be pulling. Well, I was like 400 revs short. So I started investigating the engine situation, and so the engines come in and they all have a tag like Foyt, Yarborough, and then Andretti. So I asked, could I see the dyno sheets on these things? Oh, they're all the same, all within like 5 horsepower. So I took Foyt's tag and I tried to switch it with mine. And he said, oh no, you can't do that. Oh, well, I said, now you answer my question.
Team resources are always a big deal among drivers of the same team. It always happens, they sort of want to back the horse that they think has the likeliest chance of winning. And in 1967, that horse was not Mario Andretti.
So I go to John Hallman, good guy. And I said, John, I don't think I'm getting the engines that these dudes are getting. Like, I don't think I have an engine as good as Freddie and stuff.
But what was great about Mario is he was so determined. He's so competitive, so wants to win. They kind of realized, hey, we should give this guy the good stuff as well because he's very well may win.
By race day, Holman Moody had a fresh engine that matched Lorenzen's. Andretti was even right about how far off he had been.
As soon as he hit the racetrack, they picked up 400 RPMs over the engine he had in the car, and he said he knew then he had him covered.
I was faster than Paul. I was running 182, 82 and a half, and Paul was 180.
But it would take more than horsepower to overcome a field loaded with NASCAR veterans.
More than 90,000 people have gathered at the Daytona International Speedway. They've come to see the 9th renewal of the famous Daytona 500.
As race day finally arrived, and despite limited experience at Daytona, Mario Andretti's expectations were high.
The car felt good, felt like a race car, like it had possibilities. And when the driver feels that, then your confidence level comes up, and I figure, you know what, this is good. I'm going to enjoy this.
50 thundering late model stock cars roared with the start of the Daytona 500.
I had to go to the front no matter what. That was what the car wanted, because I was really loose in traffic. If I could have sat back and be comfortable drafting, you know, all day I would have done, because I knew that I had a quick enough car that I could, you know, make it work. But the way the car was going, I said, man, if I just sit back there, sooner or later I'm going to spin this thing.
Look at this. Mario Andretti burst past these other 3 cars like they were standing still. Andretti's car is set up in an entirely different way than the other cars here.
A radically different way. He had it set up very loose. His mechanics wondered whether this was advisable, but he demanded it. It's set up loose so that it'll wander a little bit on the track, and he's made it wander right into the lead.
The car was so loose, but it was kind of a loose that I could feel I still had a bite in it. I don't think I ever turned left going in the corner. The car would rotate. As soon as I get in the corner, I just slight, you know, counter steering.
If you wanted to go fast, you had to be loose. And nobody was really used to being loose at Daytona at that time.
And these stock cars, when they're loose, they're going to be faster, but you're going to be running right on the edge, too. And one little miscue, and you're going to be going around.
Guys were all over the place. They were running so fast, and they were so loose. A lot of the guys I could tell, I mean, this is hard to say, they kind of backed up a little bit. Mario didn't enter it with that idea. He entered it like he was going to run as fast as he could, as loose as he could every lap. I remember one driver telling me, I ain't getting close to that Andretti. He says, man, it's crazy. He's all over the place. Well, he did that on purpose.
They said that it was a wreck about to happen any minute, which was wonderful for them to think that way. I didn't.
Andretti's aggression paid off. keeping him in the lead for more than half the race.
Derringer in number 26 challenges Andretti, but Andretti in number 11 hangs on. He's fought off all the NASCAR Chargers so far.
The only driver that could challenge Andretti was his teammate, Lorenzen. And at a crucial moment, the bias against Andretti returned.
I come in first, and he was behind me, and they kept my car jacked up until he went by.
And Lorenzen gets away first.
And he was just way out of the pit lane before they released me, and I was just burning up. I knew what they were doing. They just, wanted him to have some advantage because they obviously, I'd rather have him win than me. It's just fair enough. I can understand it now. I didn't understand it then. But I had the faster car, and I proved it.
Within 6 laps, Andretti passed Lorenzen to retake the lead.
Andretti and Lorenzen are running right together.
I've never concentrated so much on my driving as I did. I had to just really bring every bit I could out of the car. And it was working because I kept seeing that, I was pulling away. I figured, oh, good. And after a certain point, then he couldn't benefit anymore from my draft.
By now, Mario had opened a 20-second lead and turned on the heat to keep it that way as he stormed for the checkered flag.
And there it is. Mario Andretti has won the 1967 Daytona 500.
There's nothing like the feeling of winning. Nobody had to tell me how important it was to win the Daytona 500. It's just a fabulous feeling. For me, it really was.
An outsider seized the opportunity to be great in the sport's premier showcase. The crowd wasn't quite sure how to react.
Back then, NASCAR was very regional. Most of the guys were from the Southeast. They're all of a certain mold. They were big white guys from America. And here you have Mario Andretti. His name ends in a vowel. He definitely ruffles some feathers.
You're playing in somebody else's sandbox, and they got their own rules, and then you're not supposed to win at that game. Just like even if we had a Richard Petty or Cale Yarborough come into Indy and win Indianapolis, it's not supposed to happen, and it did.
But every crew in the garage and every driver in the race understood what Andretti had achieved.
Some of the guys said that I looked like Fireball Roberts out there. Just really going for it. That was the biggest compliment they could have paid me that day.
Probably in the history of the Daytona 500, no one has run a more difficult to drive car and put it in the winner's circle against more formidable competition than Mario Andretti did that day. There was no question that Mario Andretti was going to become one of the great race drivers in the history of auto racing.
One day at Daytona set the stage for a career that would include victories in the Indianapolis 500, the 24 Hours of Daytona, and the Formula One World Championship.
Daytona 500 is right at the very top. Each discipline has the shiny star, one that stands out, that almost puts a title on you just by winning that race. Daytona is right up at the top.
NASCAR has always been about family. And the bond between a father and son is at the root of it all.
I think racing is different than other sports from the standpoint that it's more family-oriented. With NASCAR, the sons grew up. So like a farmer and a farmer's son, you grew up on a farm, you're going to be a farmer. When you grew up around a race car, you're going to be interested to be involved in racing.
Drivers are defined by their path to success. For some, it comes quickly and easily. Others struggle for years. Such is the story of Sterling Marlin. His NASCAR career was defined by perseverance. and it was his father's dedication that shaped that determination. To understand Sterling Marlin, you have to go back to the beginning, back to NASCAR in the 1970s.
And there goes Cuckoo for the lead. Clifton Marlin, the pride of Tennessee. He's seldom been in first place against top competition like this.
He's a really good driver and kind of innovative. If he's seen something, he could sit down and build it.
Cuckoo was a tremendous racer for an independent. He ran a limited schedule.
He never really had that good of equipment, but he kept coming back, kept running.
He's always real competitive, really loved Daytona. Dad always ran really good there.
When he come to Daytona and Talladega, he always run really good. I know he had a shot to win the 500 one time.
The leader, Cuckoo Marlin.
Racing against legends, Cuckoo Marlin rarely stood out from the crowd. In a career that spanned 14 seasons, he ran 165 races without a victory.
It just got more and more expensive. He just found in 1980 said, that's it, I can't do it anymore. He got out of the car and said, there, just drive if you don't drive. That's the last race he run.
Sterling Marlin grew up in awe of his father, and racing was their bond.
My dad was my hero growing up. I always really enjoyed being around race cars, and he knew I was wanting to race.
Cuckoo got him started. He put Sterling in the car at a very young age, and Cuckoo was everything to Sterling.
Cuckoo, I know, taught him how to build cars, work on cars. Cuckoo was the ultimate father.
He says, don't take no off nobody. Says, that's it.
Well, for a young guy, he had a reputation of being a tough driver.
If there was a pre-race favorite for the Rookie of the Year laurels this year, it probably would be Sterling.
Won Rookie of the Year and won about $40,000. I said, man, hell, if it's farm, this racing deal's good.
Marlin matched his talent on the track with good old boy charm, a throwback to NASCAR's past.
In my life, I've never really met a guy like Sterling. If you had $2 to your name and you wanted to go to a bar, he'd be the guy that you wanted to go hang out with.
It's Coca-Cola. That's Coca-Cola.
And the personality that he had was down-home country.
Probably seemed a lot wider.
Not very polished.
If the car was working good, it'd be all right.
And he doesn't want to be very polished. He was born and bred to be a race car driver. Sterling Marlin, I'm talking about. Just the all-American NASCAR race car driver.
Winning Rookie of the Year didn't guarantee victories. Like his father, Marlin began a winless streak that would test his spirit.
Never gave up. As rough as the times got, they battled their way through everything you could battle through.
Racing luck, it contributes a lot. Motors breaking or having a flat or...
Zigged when it should have zagged, really wound up fourth. Run out of gas, I think, with a lap, 2 laps ago, wound up fifth. Had a good run in me in Talladega, cut down 2 tires, and just had some luck. So I think we just have a little old lady luck, and we can be right in there with them and hopefully come away for them.
Marlin often finished just shy of victory. But like his father, the place where he ran best was Daytona.
It's always been really good Daytona had. Fell in love with the track first time I drove on it. I think I run second 9 times.
Sterling Marlin was there all day, finishing second.
I got my first career pole there.
Sterling Marlin on the pole.
Sterling, I think he could surprise everybody here today.
Into the wall goes Sterling Marlin. Sterling Marlin still looking for his first Winston Cup win.
By 1994, the winless streak reached 278 races. But a change of scenery brought Marlin hope.
Larry McClure, the team owner, knew that me and Sterling were good friends. He said, hey, why don't you go talk to him? I went and recruited him and said, hey, why don't you come drive this car? And he said, let me get out of where I'm at, and I'd love to.
I knew then that time was running out. I was getting older. I wanted to win a race bad. I knew they could win races.
That team was always the talk of the garage area when you went to Daytona.
Our team really focused on the speedways. We just felt like he'd be the right guy to get it done.
He finally got in a car that was capable of winning. He had the capabilities to take that car and win races with it.
I tell you, it's a dream come true for me. Kodak is a great sponsor, and Delco Remy, and I can't wish was going to Daytona tomorrow because I think we're really going to have a good year.
As the great American race drew near, Marlin looked to his father for guidance.
He always told me to drive that car like qualifying at every lap and just drive hard, so that's what I done.
He was pretty optimistic. I knew he had the capabilities of doing it, just getting in the right situation. And at that point in time, there wasn't much faster than that 4-car on the speedways.
Troy Aikman dropping the flag on the great American race. 279th Winston Cup start for Sterling Marlin.
We was about 10th place car, 10th, 12th place car. It was too tight.
I think they only had 4 yellows that day, so we didn't get a lot of chances to work on it.
Well, I'll get you fixed up. Just bear with me. And it come down about 50 to go, and he made a big adjustment on it.
We elected to put some downforce in it. Tap the fenders out a little bit, tap the spoiler up a little bit.
It was perfect. You just hold it wide open.
From the time that he pulled it in high gear after taking the restart, he never had to lift his foot off the accelerator the whole rest of the race and took the lead.
And Sterling Marlin draws away. Does he have enough fuel to go these last 9 laps?
While his son was trying to pull off his first win, Cuckoo Marlin was nowhere to be found.
He was asleep on the motorhome. I think about 10 laps ago, my motorhome driver woke him up and said, "Buddy, get up, the son's gonna win this race." And he got up and was in the last 2 or 3 laps. He was tickled to death.
Last lap to decide it all. Here they come down the stretch for the final time. It is Sterling Marlin in the lead. Down to the inside comes the 28. Coming to the line. Sterling Marlin's going to win it. Sterling Marlin wins his first Winston Cup victory in the greatest race of them all.
Someday your day would come, and today it is.
We come down here to win it, and I knew when I left the house was going to win the race.
Can you believe you're here?
No, not really. I'm at peace myself.
Family's getting weight off his shoulders to win a race, and to win one for him was special,
Cuckoo, you got to be a proud daddy today. I remember back in '76 when you put the kid in the car, and boy, it took a while, but it was worth the wait.
It took a while. Of course, I let him drive my car 2 or 3 times right in here. Now, he's run good here several times. He just had never had put it together.
Well, he'd raced along, and he's there to see it, says it made a big deal. I miss him now.
Come on, how's it feel as a dad to watch your son win the biggest race of them all?
Oh, it feels wonderful.
You're going to be going a lot of victory lanes now, or what?
I hope so.
Glad you brought your kid along. We appreciate him. He's a good guy.
Thank you.
But Sterling Marlin wasn't some flash-in-the-pan one-hit wonder. The next year, he returned to Daytona and became one of only 3 men to win back-to-back 500s.
And the winner of 1995 Daytona 500 is again Sterling Marlin.
Marlin's career took off. Over the next decade, he won 10 races and more than $40 million in prize money.
Just never give up. Sometimes things fall into place, sometimes they don't.
If you want something bad enough, and you're a fighter like Sterling is and like Cuckoo was, you're not going to give up. It's just not in his DNA to give up.
Well, I didn't want to go down as the guy who run 280 races, didn't win a race, finally won a damn race.
At the end of one of the longest winless streaks in NASCAR history, Sterling Marlin and his father stood side by side in victory. At its core, Daytona International Speedway is a monument to innovation. It's been that way from the beginning. Bill France's dream of high banking and high speed was unheard of in 1959. The automobile had a lot of catching up to do. If ever there was a time for visionary forward thinking, it was the 1960s. It was an era with no limit to imagination, and boundaries were expected to be broken. In Detroit, the auto capital of the world, manufacturers were revolutionizing transportation and were primed to transform the world of racing.
Back then, the people in the stands could relate to those cars. They were the cars that they drove to the racetrack.
All of the spectators that are there have some type of a rooting interest in the various cars that are out on the track. That name brand, even though they don't know the driver, they just got to root for them.
The way that the manufacturers proved their performance was by winning races. They could track, the more they won, the more cars they sell.
As technology advanced, auto brands looked for any way to stay ahead of the competition.
1968, Chrysler did us a wonderful favor. They showed us what they called the Dodge Charger, and it was slick.
When Ford saw that we were doing something aerodynamically, they created their car.
We had talked a lot during the week about what it should be and so forth, and it was what turned out to be the Torino Talladega.
They were pretty race cars. They was good aerodynamics. They was good at handling. I'd put them in the top cars that I was involved with.
Leroy Yarbrough in a 69 Ford. Charlie Glotzback in a 69 Charger. And Leroy takes him. At breakneck speed, Leroy Yarbrough takes the lead.
We were afraid of the Ford car. We were afraid that they had maybe done something better than we had done. That's when we decided we were really in a war.
To keep up with Ford, Chrysler knew it would have to make some drastic changes.
We really had to have a better aerodynamic car. We didn't want to screw with the motor. And when the meeting came around, the Dodge people were there, but the Plymouth never showed up. So we called him. I said, Jim, the meeting is going on. Should we hold up till you get here? And he said, no, my boss said that we have Richard Petty and we don't need engineering's help. And we said, oh, okay. And we went ahead and did the Dodge.
They came up with your basic Dodge Charger. Then there was an appendage that you'd stick on the front, which was a long, slopey nose. But then the wing was the most incredible thing. To me, it was just about the ultimate race car. And in order for any of these cars to get on the track, the manufacturer would have to sell at least 500 of them.
Bob McCurry, he looked at the pictures and said, God, that's an awful looking thing. He said, I couldn't sell that to anybody. He said, will it win races? And we both said, yes, it'll win races. We knew in '69 that they were coming with a nose and a tail. And so I go to Plymouth and I said, okay, what are you going to do? And they said, well, you win in all the races anyway. Well, you just stay with what you want to. And I said, well, just give me a Dodge. You know what I mean? I'll be okay in a Dodge because it's still Chrysler. And they said, no, you're a Plymouth man. I told Chrysler, okay, if you're not going to play with us, we're not playing with you.
Richard Petty didn't win 200 races by not having a good race car, and he realized that with all this new aero stuff, he wanted to be competitive.
We went over and went to the very top of Ford. Probably in an hour we had a deal for 1969.
Color and the number the same, the blue number 43, and after more than a dozen years for Plymouth, Petty has moved over this year to Ford.
The Pettys have been involved with Chrysler since, the 1950. And when Richard Petty signed with Ford in 1969, you could have heard tears across the nation.
But Chrysler didn't have time for tears. They were working around the clock to test their new wing car and get it to the track as soon as possible.
Today's National 500 marks the first full-scale confrontation of Dodge's new streamlined Daytona Charger against the Ford factory team.
As the car yaws this way, one wing crawls out and creates more surface area to pull the car back. So you could run with the looser car, which is a faster car.
Any one of those drivers that ran the wing car said you couldn't spin them out.
One of the drivers said the car went way out and then it came back. And he came in and he said, the hand of God came down and saved my ass.
It was a completely different concept. We had a nice, clean little Bullet, and they had a real big vehicle.
The winged Dodge Daytonas gave Chrysler a competitive push. The Plymouths, however, were struggling, leaving them second-guessing the decision to let their superstar walk out the door.
And a 1969 Ford, Richard Petty.
By refusing to adopt a more aerodynamic body style for their Plymouths, Chrysler lost Richard Petty to Ford. If they were going to remain competitive, something needed to change.
Plymouth said, what will it take to get you back in a Plymouth? I said, give me a nose and a wing.
And with that, Chrysler began production of a modified version of their street car, the Roadrunner, aptly named the Superbird. For the 1970 season, Plymouth looked to give Petty a teammate. They found him in Pete Hamilton.
I think that the Plymouth Superbird that Richard Petty and I are running is a new innovation as far as aerodynamics in race cars, and I think much better handling race cars.
Going into turn number 3. Can he hold it? Look out! He's in trouble. He almost lost it. Pete Hamilton has won his first major NASCAR victory.
With the Daytona 500 win, Chrysler was back on top. But Ford wouldn't go quietly. And the 1970 season saw an unprecedented war of the brands.
I mean, this was T-Rex versus T-Rex.
We just felt that we'd done our job, but that we probably hadn't gone fast enough to win every race. That was the specific job that we had to do. Get all the poles, get all the races, and we'll all be happy here at Chrysler.
Anytime we lose, it's a blow to us. You work for a company and you're there to win a race.
We were trying to do stuff to outdo them. You know, they were doing stuff to try to outdo the Fords.
It became win by any means necessary.
It wasn't uncommon for manufacturers to park spies, and it wasn't hard to get information about what the other one was doing. There was a fair amount of industrial espionage that just naturally happened.
My car was sitting in the garage area, and everybody was gone, it was jacked up. And I walked around there, and there was a Chrysler guy measuring the back window on my car.
We knew that Ford was going to go testing at Daytona. Ray Fox had a friend that owned the dog track right next door. Fox managed to get us up into the dog tower. We were up there with the bumblebees and the wasps and binoculars and a pad, and we watched their test.
The battle of engineering took the stock out of stock car, and many began to feel it was time for a change.
As quickly as the Aero War showed up, it was gone.
NASCAR said, okay, you know, you manufacturers, you've had your fun. Now we have to tighten this thing back up, because now they were getting really out of hand. I mean, the Fords really didn't look like the Fords anymore. And, you know, who can relate to wings and all that sort of thing? You couldn't even own one in Maryland. According to state law, you had to have a front bumper on your car. And neither one of those wing cars had a front bumper. That knocked one whole state out of the sales.
The people that run the sport have to do what they think is best. Mr. France recognized that he needed to get back to the real stock car image.
We would have continued to develop. If NASCAR had let us, we would never have stopped there.
You know, Bill France always wanted an equal playing field. And so what we need is a common template to fit all these race cars. So we cut out all this arguing and fussing.
The body designs of the cars are not quite as slick as they were in the last couple of years. This year we went back to stock bodies with no windows, and he's able to draft a lot better.
Well, I think that Aero War era, even though it only lasted a little over a year, it was different. I think folks tend to hang on to the unusual in anything. And I think that was about as unusual as NASCAR has ever gotten.
While their life on the track was cut short, these rare machines have since found a second life in the hands of collectors.
These cars are 20 and 30 times more valuable now than people paid for them, and I don't think they ever had any idea that it was going to be worth that much money.
You know, you think back over the years and all the collectibles that you could have put back and you didn't. It never entered your mind that one day it would be worth something.
I'm sorry I didn't put a big mortgage on the house and buy 5 or 6 of them. No one ever believed at that time that the car would proceed this long. It was such a strange thing, but it was beautiful to me.
What makes for a great story? It's impossible to pick one thing. You just know it when you feel it. And all you want to do is hear the story again, right away. The list of Daytona stories is endless. Some are well known, others less so. But there's something about that place that feeds the imagination. There's always a new hero, an unforgettable image, or a thrilling finish. The collection of moments that make up the history of Daytona will forever endure. Whether a story is told 1,000 times or just once.